So what was happening in 1980? Do you remember 1980? Some of you weren't even a twinkle, but others of us, you might have to think a little bit and scratch our heads and contemplate and wonder. So what was going on in 1980? Well, it was the launching of CNN, if you can believe that. It was a time where Post-it notes showed up for the first time. Imagine that, a world without Post-it notes. It was the Miracle on Ice, where the USA hockey team defeated the Russian hockey team. It was the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Maybe St. Helen is Holland, but it was Mount St. Helens that erupted and kind of went sideways with that lateral blast thing. But it was also a time when a book came out. And for me, it was a significant book, an impactful book. It was a book written by Eugene Peterson, and it was a study of some Psalms, kind of the middle to the end of the book of Psalms, 120 to 140, actually titled Psalms of Ascent, because they were songs and prayers of the people of Israel as they were on pilgrimage, on journey to Jerusalem. And so it was a song and a prayer of pilgrims on their way to worship God in the temple at Jerusalem. And if you read through the Psalms, beginning in 120 and kind of move towards 140, you'll see that in the title. It says a song of pilgrims ascending to Jerusalem, and each one kind of labels it that. In Psalm 120, I took my troubles to the Lord. Psalm 121, I look to the mountains. Does my help come from there? Oh, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. Psalm 122, I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. They were on their way. They were ascending. And the title of this book is A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Now, I've got to be honest with you. I was 23 years old in 1980, and I didn't really understand a long obedience in the same direction. I had been an all-in follower of Jesus Christ for 8 years now. I had yielded my life. I was on my way to serve God through whatever kind of call He put on my life, whether it was campus ministry, mission field, church pastoral stuff, but I didn't really know what, and I didn't really know what was going to happen, because at 23, there's not a long enough time for a long enough obedience in the same direction. So I didn't fully comprehend or understand what was happening with that title. On the journey, I was in my 1.5 year of seminary. Marianne and I were barely married, and so we had just begun to take steps of obedience. There was nothing long in our obedience in the same direction. And yet, at this point, some of those pieces come together. At this point in my life, some 40 years later, those pieces come together, and I begin to see what Peterson was talking about, where there's this continued intentional step by step by step, each step of the way, each breath we take on that journey. One of the things we realize and understand over time is that followers of Jesus, we live in the same world as non-followers of Jesus. We travel the same roads, we hit the same traffic jams, we navigate the same potholes, and sometimes we even run out of gas on the side of the road, or run out of gas in symbolic and figurative ways. Being a Christian or being a follower of Jesus doesn't mean that we are immune from those things. But as you move through the Psalms of Ascent, that is Psalms 120 through 140, as they are titled again, A Song of Pilgrims Ascending to Jerusalem, we are on a journey. As we are drawn closer and closer into the presence of God, we are made more and more into the image of Christ, and that is a step by step by step, intentional process, intentional journey. There is a rhythm of discipleship in what Peterson writes about in this book, where we navigate joy and worship and humility. We navigate mountains and valleys and trees and rocks and crevices and crags and swimming holes and all of that as we continue to move intentionally in faith in Jesus Christ. And so as we travel those same roads and we navigate those same potholes, the difference is our journey is with God. Each step we take, each breath we breathe, we are accompanied by God. We find ourselves under the protection and the provision and the promise of God. We have intentionally placed ourselves under his rule. He is our king. We have intentionally moved to a place in this journey where we yield our wills to his will. We yield our agenda to his agenda. There are pieces and aspects of repentance. Which is simply to turn from what I'm trying to do to what God is trying to do, and embrace that and live into that. It's a long obedience in the same direction. And 40 years after initially reading this book, which can be found somewhere up there on those shelves of books back there that I've been accumulating for more than 40 years now, but somewhere in the process I begin to understand the steps we take and the decisions we make, and how, as we continue to move towards God, as we continue to allow the Spirit to refine and reform the character, as we begin to be refreshed and renewed, redeemed and restored into all that God intends, a long obedience in the same direction begins to make sense. It's not a quick journey. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And yet there is joy. There is wonder. So I would invite you to turn to those Psalms, to read Psalm 120 through 140, and just spend some time in those with a new awareness, with a new delight that you are reading those Psalms and you were walking with pilgrims, centuries of pilgrims who sought God's presence, who desired to worship in the temple, in the very presence of God. Do it with a new awareness. Do it with a new light. Do it with a newfound joy that each step you take, each breath you breathe, is in the company of our God, the one who loves us, the one who died for us, that our sin would not inhibit or intrude upon our being able to be together with him forever. Enjoy the journey, enjoy the walk, and keep taking the steps as you walk faithfully with our God. God bless you. We'll chat next week.